May I invite Mr. William Malek on the stage ขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับด้วยนะคะ
สวัสดีครับสบายดีไหม Good. That's all the Thai I know. So we're in trouble. So I'll try to speak slower, but welcome. My topic today is about design thinking. But before I start, I'd like to do a quick survey. So you have to raise your hand when I ask you the question, okay? So the first one is, how many of you are in a VC or privately funded startup right now? Please raise your hand if you meet this criteria. Okay, about 5%. How many of you are VCs? Raise your hand. Another 5%. How many of you are educators of any type in innovation? A little bit long. How many of you work for businesses? Any business? Okay, I get it. All right, good. So it's always good to check in. Now, the next question is, how many of you have ever worked on a design thinking project? Please raise your hand. If you've worked on a design thinking project. Wow, fantastic. So there's about a third of you. I'm assuming the rest of you have either heard about it and are here to contemplate what this means. So we're in great shape. We're going to ask the experts who have been executing this as we go along the way. A couple quick things about myself. I have two legacies. One took 8 years, 80 hours a week, working at Stanford to build one of the most disruptive executive education programs in Stanford's in the last 20 years. It took me 8 years. You got that? 80 hours a week. This took me 3 seconds. My 3-year-old daughter, right? So the difference in execution is really different, but nevertheless, these are the things that I'll be leaving behind and talk to you. But what was very interesting as I got going, in about the year 2000 at Stanford, the video TV show, ABC Nightline, aired nationally the video, or essentially a docudrama about IDEO. It was about how IDEO used this process to reinvent the shopping cart. And to say the least, I was profoundly impacted by this. I'm watching this in a hotel room going, I've got to put this into the Stanford curriculum because this is a Stanford professor, Dave Kelly was in the show, and I know how to take this process and put it into a project planning orientation. So I have essentially been working with design thinking in its early form for 18 years. It never got the name until about 2007 when Hasso-Plattner gave Stanford $35 million and said, figure it out, we're going to build a design school around this thing called design thinking. The roots of this actually started at Stanford in a mechanical engineering course called visual thinking, primarily focused on product design, which Dave Kelly, Robert McKim, and some others were involved with in terms of teaching engineering students how to see and develop and design products. Now, before I get started on this, I'm going to step back for a moment, and let's think about the context that we're in right now. In a minute, I'm going to click this button, and what it's going to show you, you're going to see text up on the video, and it's going to simulate for you in real time by showing you how fast a lake, and this happens to be Lake, I think, Michigan, would fill up at the rate of current technology in terms of the speed, right? So what we do know that's coming quickly, and it's here now, is quantum computing. It will literally increase the speed of computation by a magnitude or more. So let's just watch this, and I want to get you just a sense the world that we're living in and how fast it's moving. So pay attention to the text. It's going to simulate the lake filling up in real time according to the speed of computing capacity to match the human brain. Okay, let us see what it looks like. So hopefully you can really attempt to kinesthetically understand. We are living at the rate of exponential change. It's no longer a linear pattern, which means there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the rate of change that's actually upon us and will continue to accelerate. Why is this important? Because business success, society success, will fundamentally be based on how fast you can move, how fast you can keep up with the competition, how fast you can reinvent, how fast you can innovate. So this is a core premise in my conversation today with you about design thinking. My assertion is if you really understand the basis of design thinking and the 7 keys and the 7 steps, you will understand how to quickly be able to move and act on opportunities or challenges as you encounter them in your business world or your private world as a startup. So this is Dave Kelly. What's happened in the last 10 years since the D School was formed and they formalized the word design thinking, there are at least 27 different derivatives of design thinking frameworks in the world. 27. Now, in the academic world, what we say is when somebody imitates you, that's the highest form of flattery. This is a good thing. And it's now very pervasive. Organizations are no longer using design thinking simply for product design. They're actually using it to solve immediate known problems and challenges. It is not just for the product or service design orientation, which it emerged from originally. Now, the basic of design thinking is really quite simple. It really says, we want to start with people. We want to start with solving the people problems. And I'm going to show you some examples today of what that looks like and what it feels like in real terms. The notion is that technology people love to start with technology, and they start here and they try to move up to the people, what we call a force fit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So the notion is if we actually begin to empathize with the people that have the problem, the organizations that have the problems, if we can truly understand that problem set, we can actually create better and more effective products and solutions in the marketplace. So there's some characteristics of design thinking. Anyone can do it. This is not product designers. I can teach an executive assistant how to do design thinking and participate in a team fairly quickly. It can be applied to all processes and industries. It involves methods that enable empathy with people, listening deeply to their needs, wants, motivations. It takes a balanced approach to defining a problem actively as finding the solution. And you'll see this in a minute as I demonstrate what that looks like. It explores solutions. It is collaborative and requires iterative prototyping. And finally, you can solve all kinds of problems with this. And this is one reason many organizations, is anybody from IBM here? IBM, they're training 80,000 people. They're hiring 5,000 design thinking facilitators, and it's not just for product design. They're doing it every element of their business, of their DNA, to change and be able to keep up with the disruption that they are actually creating themselves through quantum computing and other things that they're involved with. What it is not just for creative people. In fact, I can show you what people that think they're not creative can actually get creative very quickly by following the process and the rules of engagement. It's not just for product and service, I said. It's not just a brainstorming session, and it's not just a one-day thing. I really start to chuckle when people tell me, oh, we're doing a one-day hackathon and we'll have the solutions out. For those of you who've been in startup, you know that that is not true. It's the outlier in the data. If you can come up in one day, you can get a lot of ideas, it's great. But when we move through executing an idea, then the game changes. Because I usually say, a great idea not executed is worth absolutely zero in business. So we'll look at this in a minute. It's not a process that replaces analytical problem solving. There still is a role for deep analytical scientific approach to solving specific problems. So let me be very clear. If I'm redesigning a gas turbine engine, I'm not going to use design thinking. I'm going to use engineering, science, and physics to figure out how to make a better engine, right? I'm not going to go ask, the ground crew, what do you think we should do with the blades and the rotor speed, et cetera. And the last one is, this is important, it's not a magic pill. It's not. In fact, by definition, if you accept that new product launches, and I'll show you what the rate of success and failure is in the venture capital world, it's a process to learn, and learn deeply and learn fastly. So a couple things I just want to also highlight. First of all, as I said, it's a learning process. If you understand failure as a learning process, you will embrace this because I learn quicker. And if we're back to that speed issue, if we understand how fast things are changing, the thing that every one of us must be doing now is learning faster. I have come to my own personal realization I've got to keep up 10 times faster than I did 20 years ago. Teaching at Stanford, even trying to keep up in very leading research areas. Now what's interesting, the World Economic Forum has cited these 7 things that by 2020, most people need to begin to embrace as a core skill. Core, not optional. That if you want to hire high productive employees, those 7 areas are what is suggested as being core. Now what's very powerful is that they happen to be the core skills of design thinking. So if you want to get a jump on the rate of learning and learning faster, I offer to you, by getting engaged with the design thinking project, you can actually get in front of the curve on learning simply because we know it's the skills that you're going to be required as we move forward in the future. More robots, more automation, et cetera. And just to prove the point that this is not like theoretical imagination thing, this is a report from the Design Management Institute. It's tracking companies with specific criteria who have embedded design thinking into the core of their businesses, measured by executive support, design thinking, innovation labs that have absorbed it, and they're tracking their progress from year to year, and they're seeing significant, dramatic performance over companies that are not doing it. So it's no longer a question of does this work? The question is how do you adapt it? How do you adapt it inside your organization? And just to prove my point, this is a couple months ago. This is IBM's report done by Forrester where they tracked their design thinking projects for a specific period of time, and 2 times faster to market, 75% reduced time, and 33% reduced development time. That's money, that's ROI. That's significant when you talk about business world and competition and so forth. As I said before, you can apply it in more ways than one, and that's why it's a good thing to learn, because it's not just about product design. Now, here are the 7 steps. I'm going to go through fast. And by the way, you don't have to take photos of it all, because at the end, I'm going to give you a chance to take a photo of a QR code, and you can go download the whole thing, all right? You with me? Okay. So I'm getting blinded by all the, like a rock star, no, but I know what you're doing, so it's okay, all right? So you'll get it, trust me. Number 2, empathize and let go. 3, define and reframe. Ideate and create. 5 is prototype and test. 6 is iterate and learn. And 7 is you have to have a business case, and then you get to build it, okay? I'm going to go through each one of these and give you my personal opinion about where you might want to focus, having been involved with this for many years in the context of design thinking. The first one, and this, by the way, was learned 4, 5, 6 years after the design thinking model was actually introduced in the D School. Bill Burnett, in particular, was one of the co-founders, said, gosh, we're having a lot of failures. Design thinking isn't working here, there, and everything. And when they did root cause analysis and they went back, they said, you know what? We're not framing the problem right in the beginning. We're solving problems that nobody wants to get fixed. And so what he said is we got to put something in front of the design thinking process, and they called it understand. And it's about, do you really understand the problem or opportunity? I'm going to give you some examples of this. Now, one of the things that I teach is that a leader and an effective professional, if you learn how to ask questions, you are going to have significant creative power and influence in what you do. I'll give you an example. So here's the first question. What is 5 plus 5? Right? Pretty easy, right? Sip. Ding, right? 10. Okay? Now, I'm going to reframe the question slightly to provoke a creative response. You ready? Okay, here we go. Different question, different approach. What is? What's the answer? Infinite possibilities. Infinite. A simple reframing of a question can change your life. It can change your products, your services, your ability to succeed in innovation. So you really need to understand the power of questions, focusing on the questions, not on direction and answers. And this is very true in the beginning of design thinking. Now, how many of you have seen this before, right? You know when Bill Gates came here, I think it was, 2010? First of all, he made a mistake. He thought these were power lines, right? These are telecom cables. And it hasn't got, it's worse now. They keep growing this thing. The question I'm asking you, do we need to disrupt this in Thailand? You know, when I first came here, I'm thinking, gosh, they are like 30 years behind. Because you don't see this in the United States. I mean, it's invisible. It's in the ground, pretty much, okay? But after 10 years, I started to think, you know, this is, when you talk about speed and the need to be adaptable, I see a company hanging a new wire every other day, and it's fast. And they're getting customer served faster than if they had to lay in the ground, get all the things done, etc. You get me? And they can see where the break is, by the way, when it happens. There are many reasons we have to be careful about the things we see and the questions we ask. And of course, Gates took his Facebook post down because he looked like an idiot for doing, this is a power cable. No, these are telecom cables. Now they're hanging off a power cable, but this is just an example of observing things to really ponder what are the right questions that we should be asking about opportunities and challenges that we see. And our famous Peter Drucker, who's considered the foremost management guru of all time, he said the serious mistakes is really asking the wrong question. Leaders need to make sure that they're asking effective questions in terms of what they're doing. Now, I would stand up here 10 years ago, and by the way, 10 years ago, I was actually on this stage doing a book promo for my book, sponsored by the American Chamber of Commerce and Harvard University, on this stage to talk about my book. But today, I'm telling you, the book you want to buy is right here. A more beautiful question. It talks about the social science and psychology of innovation with respect to questions. It's a powerful book. Of all the books I would read, and I've got hundreds and, I've got a stack, this is the one you want to pay attention to. It actually will help you understand the nature of asking questions and so forth. One of the things in the phase of creativity is you have to let go of the things you believe are true so you can step back and get into the shoes of the person or people or organization and experience the world from an unbiased perspective. This is easier said than done. Easier said than done. You have to let go of the need of the solution. They say in design thinking, fall in love with the problem, not your solution. You will have much better chance of success if you fall in love with the problem and not the solution. And again, by asking the questions at the right time, you will provoke a greater sense of creativity and so forth. And this one I've learned back from MIT days, Peter Senge in systems thinking. He says, asking the right question at the right time is the central act of transformation and innovation. If you pose to a group at exactly the right time, the explosive power of creative thinking becomes incredibly open, freeing, joyous, because the mind is working at an entirely different level in terms of solving problems. Now, how have you ever heard of the mom test? All right, so this is another book, but I'm going to give you the essence of this book, okay? So you all owe me 400 baht on the way out, okay? If you're going to go talk to people, you really want to make sure you understand how to actually go out and talk. Now, before I do that, the problem of not talking to people is this. There's an intention of design, but because you didn't talk to the person, the real use of your product becomes completely different. And in fact, in product design, they won't buy it. So if you miss this opportunity to not talk, you may end up building something that actually doesn't even matter, or people ignore it in terms of what they're doing. And it's arguably, this is Dev Patnaik, who worked with Google at the beginning. He's now off doing his own thing. But he says the problem with this is not a lack of innovation, it's a lack of empathy. You're not asking the right questions to the right target markets at the right time. If you get this, you win the game downstream of design thinking. And this is why empathy is all up front. It's not downstream of the process. So the notion of the mom test, this is the book, is that people who you go to, some cases, when you're going to talk to them, they're not going to tell you the truth. You know, it's like you never want to say, my baby looks ugly, right? And by the way, in Thailand, okay, when I first got here, okay, people try to be nice, especially in Thailand. It's literally part of the culture. Something may be very wrong, but it's respect. They want to be in harmony with you. They're not going to tell you something very negative. They're going to, this is beautiful, because it's a collective society. In the United States, it is not. It's more individual focus and so forth, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Therefore, the reality is, in certain cases, they're kind of lying. I call it white lying. Oh, that looks beautiful. And I'll show you the example of this in just a minute. But here's the deal. Bad data is worse than no data. You don't want to put bad data into the system up front with design thinking. Okay, so this is the example. I would definitely buy that, but let's look at this problem statement real quick. Okay, this is what people say. This is me. Mom, I have a business idea. Do you have 5 minutes? Oh, of course, dear. You like your iPad and use it a lot, huh? Sure, it's great, says Mom. Oh, would you buy a cookbook app? I love cookbooks. Sounds nice. Does it come with vegan recipes? Okay, you get the sense of the conversation. It's there and so forth. Now, let's see what she was really thinking, okay? Mom, I have a business idea. Do you have 5 minutes? Of course, dear. I'm proud of you, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. You like your iPad and use it a lot? Oh, it's great. It's used to check email on the sofa. She's not acknowledging, answering the question, but she's really thinking something differently. Would you buy a cookbook app? I love cookbooks. Sounds nice, but she says, well, I have plenty of cookbooks, so I don't need a computer in my kitchen. It might get dirty, but hey, if my kid made it, I'll try the app. I never bought one. Do you need to enter a credit card for that? Let me try and change the subject. The chatter behind, the real story. So the question is, how do we overcome this? This is the art of empathy, is your interview questions. You have to know and be strategic about learning how to do this, all right? So here's how to do it right. You, Mom, when have you last used the iPad? For what? Have you ever used it in the kitchen? Have you ever bought an app? Which one? Why? For how much? Do you use your cookbooks? Is there anything you dislike about them? In other words, you must be strategic with the questions to surface frustrations, motivations, desires, gains and pains that they're looking at. And this is the art of effective empathy in the first phase. I'm now moving on to step 3. Arguably, probably the most powerful area that you have to do. Once you get the interviews, you got to come back and synthesize. You have to look for patterns. You have to look for, what are they really saying? What are they not saying? What's the point of view? What is the real problem that they're trying to present to us in the game? And this is done through collective teamwork, looking at interview maps, and empathy maps. There's all kinds of different tools you can do this, and there's apps to do this on top of it. But what I want to do is share with you that Burnett, who's part of the D School, says you must learn how to reframe your first assumption, how you test your hypothesis about what you think the problem is. Now, many of you, if you've been involved or been anywhere close to the Stanford D School, there's a real famous case, which I'm about to share with you, with really smart engineering students, and some were not engineering students, going to the D School. But it was in a program called Extreme Affordability. They're looking for solutions to markets that are not served, i.e. poor people, poor families in different countries and so forth. The notion was that in India and Nepal, there's a major problem of premature births, babies dying before they even get to the hospital. When they had the first problem statement, the entire focus was all clinical. What incubators do we need? How can we use the incubators to keep the babies alive? Because it's all about birth weight and body temperature, for the most part, with premature births. So there was a huge focus on let's fix the incubator. What can we do to innovate the systems in and around the hospital with the incubator? What ended up happening, though, was they figured out they weren't even on the right track. So I'm going to show you the conversation that led them from we're over here with this point of view about it's a doctor and technology problem to no, it's a baby problem with the mother at the point of birth. Okay? So let's listen, and you're going to see a design thinking team reflect on how they got misled and what happened when they turned the corner to see why they had to shift. So listen carefully. It's a little bit, this is Indian, a little bit Indian team, so you have to listen for the language. Here we go.
Linus comes back with his wide-eyed wonder.
Basically came back and immediately started trying to disseminate everything I saw, all the video, all the pictures, to the whole team.
This was an after-class session that every team is kind of trying to come up with their POV.
Who are you designing for? Who's the user and what is their need? And then from that you form a point of view.
Then coming up with this point of view is the next big thing, where you kind of figure out who your user is and what their need is. And that's probably the place where you have to spend the most amount of time ever, because that pretty much sets the trend for what happens later on.
So there was a lot of storytelling, like space saturation, right? Lots of pictures, video, just about Linus's experiences there.
And he was sharing some of what he found. So one of the interesting things was that there were actually a lot of donated incubators in the hospital, but they were all empty.
And then so the doctor tells him, yeah, actually most of these babies die out in rural areas. Right? So then they actually took a trip to one of these rural areas.
A woman who had given birth to a premature baby had taken the baby to a local village doctor, and the doctor said to her, I don't have the equipment necessary to care for this baby. You need to take her to the nearest city hospital so she can be placed in an incubator. But the woman can't get to that hospital in time. It's over 4 hours away. And as a result, the baby dies.
It's this desperate parent, okay? And we could feel the angst, okay? And we need to provide them some means of giving this baby a shot at living. We had to decide where we're going to design for. Are we going to design for the extreme remote areas? Are we going to design for something in between? So on the one hand, there's a clear need here for something that will work in rural areas. On the other hand, there's the engineer and me telling me, dude, that's going to be hard. We had mixed opinions on this, right? Some people on the team wanted to do the more remote setting. Others wanted to do something, and I was one of the others who was caught in two minds. Should we actually be doing something more tractable, right? That can actually be done by the end of the class. We were stuck here, and finally we get one of the TAs in this class, which again happens to be Sarah, who I consulted before the class. And she came up and said, we presented her with what we are facing, and she said, given a choice, I'd say go after the hard challenge. See, this is what puts the extreme in extreme affordability. Okay. He said, okay, fine. We'll try, we'll see what we can do with the more rural setting. And so our POV became what it is, which is a desperate parent in a remote village needs to give their dying baby a chance to survive. So that was a POV. And that was, I think, a point of definition where we did. So this means, okay, we're going to rethink the problem here.
Our point of view, the user is a desperate parent living in a remote village who needs the means to give her dying baby a chance to survive. So that's how we reframe the problem. It's no longer about the clinician, but about the parent.
We've also taken a step back from incubators, and we're saying that we're trying to give these babies a chance to survive.
That's where we defined the problem, and that's where we said, all right, we're going to try to do something, and we always, for this user and for this need, and we always we posted it on our sort of our whiteboard, and we'll always go back and say, okay, are we still addressing this point of view? You know, after every time we come up with a prototype and every time we do an iteration or something like that, are we still focusing, you know, are we still making sure that we're reaching this user and meeting their needs?
The point of view is staring at us from the board every day as we work.
It keeps us grounded, right? Instead of going everywhere, you just always go back and, you know, make sure that you're fighting the good fight. Right?
It's very powerful to have to have something written down, and that's constantly guiding us in this process.
We always try to bring it back to that POV, and so that's sort of why we came with the design and took it in sort of a different direction.
I'm Rahul Panikar. I'm a design thinker.
I'm Linus Liang, and I'm a design thinker.
I'm Nagmurthy, and I'm a design thinker.
I'm Jane Chen, and I'm a design thinker.
Okay, so a couple things. They go to the hospital. They think the problem is with the technology and the systems at the hospital with respect to getting the babies into the incubator, and they see what? Empty incubators. They're going, what's going on here? They had to ask the question, why? Once that started, the question was, what's behind this? It shifted and it ended up out. The point of view wasn't even at the hospital. As I said, it's the desperate parents in a remote village who really want the opportunity to save their baby. So once you get the point of view right, the problem is clear about what you're going to design around and what you're going to execute. You get the point of view wrong, in design thinking, you're going to iterate again for sure. Or in fact, you have to go all the way back to the beginning to start the process. So the bottom line is that this is actually up to date now as saved 300,000 babies. It's in the market. I think they're still in startup mode, though, by the way. They have seed money and venture money behind them, and I think even Dave Kelly's involved with this, et cetera. And I give you the link. But the key point here is I love from Einstein. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes executing. And this is very true in design thinking. If you can really understand that, as opposed, I got a solution in a technology, I think I got the solution and go, you're actually going to go slower. Because you're going to constantly come back and have to iterate to the point, did you get the problem statement? Did I get my needs right? It was the mother in the remote village that I had to focus on. And so they developed that little thermal baby blanket, which, by the way, had to be affordable to the mother and the family. It couldn't be an incubator. There was no way. And that's where you heard him say, somebody challenged him and said, you know, the easy way out is to go figure out the technology piece, but the harder part would be engineering that little blanket. And you can read, I've given you the links, you can go read about the end of the story. Next step, ideate and create. This is the fun step. We know our POV, now we got to come up with creative solutions, all right? This is what they call thinking out of the box for a lot of people. The key in this phase, my experience, my opinion, you need structured facilitation. You must have facilitators that know how to manage a group through a very creative process with discipline, but allow a lot of open conversation, disagreement, etc. Just to give you a sense, in the venture capital world, this is a real successful VC fund in Silicon Valley. I want you to just clearly see, out of 1,000 pitches from startups, 500 reviewed, they did 40 due diligence on the 500, there were 20 partner votes on the 40 due diligence, and 10 deals, okay? This is how hard it is to get money. on great ideas. You got to convince a group that your idea is both powerful and executable, right? So that's about 1% success rate. So if you're in the startup world, that's why there's a few of you, 3%, 5%, but it's not easy. So the idea generation phase is actually a leading indicator of the effectiveness of an organization or team or entrepreneur in terms of will they be successful. Because if you just do the math, it says, I've got to have more ideas that ultimately boil down to the one or two that we're going to go execute. Now, a quick story. Genius is the discovery of the essence of the cause-effect relations of an unknown reality, the ability to see what is already hidden from sight, creating insight. Does anybody know how Bill Gates became I think he's the third richest man now, because I think Jeff Bezos just took him over. And Zuckerberg just lost $150 trillion or something last week or something. But Gates was walking down a street as a college in Harvard. I think he was actually working at, I think, Xerox or something at the time. But he's walking down the street, and there's a magazine store on the street. And he sees the front page of Popular Mechanics, which is kind of a geeky new innovation magazine in the United States. And it was back in the 70s. I think it's still there. But what he sees is a prototype of the Atari computer. And he's looking at it. So this is the first time he's seen insight of something he's never seen before. He was working in a huge data center. The big, monolithic IBM data centers at the time. He sees this little screen at the Atari, but his fascination was, well, what program are they running it on? And this is a true story. It's the moment he's literally walking down the street, he sees the magazine, he stops, and there is that he became a billionaire at that moment of insight. And this has been researched by professors at Columbia and other places. The moment of strategic intuition. That's what you all hope for. That's what we hope for in our lives about everything, our family, our jobs, what we're doing, and so forth. The second definition about intelligence. What Gates was trying to do was to hold two things in paradox. Is the code in the large data center going to work in this little mini computer that nobody had ever seen before? The personal computer wasn't even in existence. It was just a prototype, an idea. He had to be able to hold two things opposing at the same time and not lose his sanity. This is actually a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. I like it because it really talks about the paradox. The creativity is the ability to create a third unique idea out of the two opposed ideas. This is why in creative team sessions, you want disagreement. You want different perspectives. You want different opinions. You want to be challenging the edges of your thought and your perspectives to gain the opportunity to create a third option out of two opposing ideas. And it gets to the whole Eastern concept of yin and yang. There's where I have my... I can't tell you, I used to say, look, you have the brainstorming session, but where the action really happens, if you all know, it's here. It's when you're walking your dog and you're relaxing at night thinking, and then all of a sudden it hits you, right? How many of you had that experience? A lot of people tell me, oh, you know what? It's in the morning when I'm taking a shower. Because your conscious brain is not fully activated. You're kind of coming out of subconscious, unconscious dream state. And all of a sudden it's there because you're not thinking from that neofrontal cortex. It's just simply happening. So again, the notion of creativity is fun. It needs structured facilitation to get that idea generation out, to have effective ideas, to create the paradox that we need, and then you need to let it go. Let the higher mind and your abilities to actually do that. And by the way, I think it was Archimedes, right? Anybody here in physics? Archimedes was in a bathtub when he figured out Archimedes' law. Am I? Yeah. If you know physics, okay? Now, how do you select a design thinking team? I'm going to go through this very quickly because I get this question a lot. Not what's the process, because I really believe you got to put the right people on, right? Now, there's research. You can go get this, and you'll get the slide, but this is out of Christensen's book, which was a follow-up to his book on what's the DNA? What do you need in the team? What skills do I need in the team? His answer is you got to have these 5 things here, the 4 green and the blue, okay? And you can test this. We actually, at SEAC, we test this with our clients. They take an assessment. We find out on a 1 to 7 scale, self-assessment, where people think they are in terms of their skill set around this area. And then we look at using that as a way to combine who should be on what team for the design thinking projects. The real question is, do you want superstars? Well, this was actually answered by Procter & Gamble, who took on design thinking as a process of innovation. And it's interesting, what he described as the real superstars were people who spread their ideas to others, they borrow idea from others, and give them credit and help others succeed. To the point that he made the statement, cooperation and information sharing is not considered in compensation decisions. If people don't do it, they don't get promoted. He built a culture of innovation by truly understanding what it was required of managers and professionals who are in the innovation domain doing projects and so forth. Became well known for it, and Procter & Gamble has had amazing success. The other thing you want on teams is this. Somebody who's just crazy. Because they're not going to accept the norm. They're going to ask dumb questions, they're going to be crazy, and so forth. We call it the creative deviant. The other element of just thinking about how you select a team is you want people outside of your business. You know, I get executives say, we're going to do a technology thing and I want my IT department to be the design thinking team. I say, no. I said, well, give me the marketing team in another business to join your team. Because I'm going to create the intersection of different ideas to reformulate how creative the team can actually do. And again, there's research written on this and so forth about how to form cross-discipline teams for your projects. The last comment I'm going to make, and I am going to spend just a moment on this, because I'm telling you, I've been here 10 years now, and I have 25 minutes left. But I'm going to slow down on this one, because when I first got here, I couldn't believe it. I was a Westerner, born, baked in California, educated, Stanford University, and I get here and I try to do my stuff from Stanford. Didn't work. In fact, I did my first strategic planning session. I had a bunch of executives. The GM was in the room. And in the United States, you can ask questions. What do you think the biggest problems are of the organization? People just, and you grab it, you do the workshop. I went into the group to start my SWOT analysis. Strengths are okay, everybody's talking about how good things are. Remember the mom test? We're in Thailand, kreng chai. Chai Weaknesses. I asked, nobody said a thing. And by the way, this is the C level. Maybe C-1, the executive, and nobody's talking. And I'm like, I'm checking. What's going on here? And as a good facilitator, what you do is you say, let's take a break. I took a break. I go grab the assistant. She came right over me. I said, look, nobody's talking. What's going on? He said, oh, the boss is in the room. I said, that's why? I said, okay, well, go ask him to leave. She says, I know what you're talking about. I'm going to go do it and let him know. And she did the Thai way. Please, and I gave her a little bit of instruction. He was fine with it. Come back after the break. He's gone. What are the weaknesses? I had to learn fast that what I was structured to learn as success in a Western European wouldn't work. You've got to adapt to the culture. Now, I'm going to shift this in a minute to say also the culture of Thailand needs to adapt to the innovation. The other way around. It has to work both ways. Because the notion of our national culture, our mindsets and values, kreng chai, respect, I love it. I don't want it to go away. I'm staying here because people are generally much more kind and sensitive as opposed to Donald Trump. I mean, it's a big deal difference, right? If people were doing what they do to Donald Trump here, they'd be, you get the picture, right? That would not work, all right? So, Thailand, this is 2018. Innovation Index. The good news is you moved up from 57 to 44 in 1 year. I like it. Okay? The problem is you're still in the middle of the pack. Out of 120, I think this year was 126, okay? What's interesting, the research has been done on cultural differences between the top performers and the bottom performers. The good news is you're not in the bottom. You're in the middle for the opportunity for ascension. Now, if you just look at the differences in cultural biases between US and Thailand, I think you begin to see immediately why I had problems when I first got here. How people communicate are completely different. How they get evaluated, how you persuade, how you lead. In Thailand, it's much more top-down. The boss is telling and driving down. In the United States, the boss, who cares? Now, you got a role, but you're pretty much insignificant, especially when it comes to innovation, because you probably don't know what the answer is. It's your people on the front line who are talking to the customers, all right? So there's many indices deciding how you trust. A big one, disagreeing. Thais in general do not like outward aggressive energy. And to my compatriots that are here, I always say, if you don't believe me, just go down Sukhumvit and tell me how many times you hear a horn honking on a car. Very little. Because there's a notion in Thailand, Mai Pen Rai, let it go. The traffic will clear up. Don't get anxious. It's just a fact of life. You don't need to get over concerned about. So there's a notion. In fact, I've seen drivers who honk, and then the Thais are looking at you like, what? Stop, right? Affecting the collective harmony. Things will work themselves out, right? This kind of notion. So even deeply within our conflict and disagreeing, which is where we need to be, this is where the ideation, creativity comes. We need to be okay with disagreeing with the boss. But we have to have rules of engagement. We need structured facilitation so that I, as a team member, can have a powerful conversation with my boss. We don't want him out of the room. I said I want him in the room. He's part of the solution. But I had to get it opened up, right, with the team just to get it started. So the notion is, I'm just going to go quickly with you, in Thailand, if the top knows best, we have to understand there's going to be little information flow. In fact, I was with a CEO the other day of a bank here, and I actually did a prototype for him. I tested his system to use one of his services, and it was painful. And he said, tell me what happened. He says, why don't my people tell me about this? Really? You did? I said, yeah. And he was proud and he's very successful. He says, my people aren't telling me where the problems are. Now, in the United States and other countries, we call this the emperor has no clothes. Because if there's no upward flow of the problem set, the boss who needs to lead the team to innovation doesn't even know where to start. And he wants to know. He says, I want to know from my people. So a lot of this has to do with the notion then even of saving face, don't make an error, don't be rebellious, right? This is taught in the school system here. Pay attention to I think there's even a Thai concept that if you obey your parents, the dog won't bite you. You all know the Thai parable around that. Yeah. Face, you don't want to disappoint because we honor the collective. Versus the United States, the individual. Okay. I've been in arguments at Stanford that would look like a boxing match, but you know what? At the end of the day, we went out and had beers, and it was okay. But we came up with different solutions. In Thailand, it's different. We have to learn how to adapt to make sure that we can actually take risks and maintain harmony in a good way. Maintain. This is the power of the Confucian Buddhist culture that we need to acknowledge and honor in doing this. 80% of the success of design thinking is cultural, is mindset, it's leadership. The process is simple. You can get all these tools for free online. It's the adaptation with process and the mindsets that are critical. And most importantly, we've got to be allowing failure. And it's not bad. You don't lose face by making a failure in design thinking. It is a huge positive learning moment. You celebrate, in fact, you reward it. An entirely different notion of leadership, okay? And if you don't believe me, the notion, this is the Google project they've been running for years, just reported about what makes effective innovation teams. Number one issue, psychological safety. I did that research at least 10 years ago, same conclusion. If you don't have psychological safety, which means I can be protected, that my ideas will be shared without being shamed or blamed, I will give you more. I will take risks to let the team innovate effectively. So this is a very important one for people in design thinking teams. What are you doing to create more psychological safety, okay? There's one tool. I'm going to give it to you this because I learned this the hard way. But it's very simple. You must reframe your responses to people from yes, but to yes, and. How many of you seen this before? Just by a show of hands. Okay, so 50% of you, you can give me 20,000 baht each on the way out. This will change your life if you're a leader. Yes, and. When I say yes, but, what does the but say? Now in English, right? The but says, I don't agree with you. Get out of the way. Yes, and psychologically promotes what they call and both, either or. We can figure this out collaboratively in the creation. So words matter. Your psychological safety. Get this one. You can take a picture of this one. Just remember this on the slide deck. Don't forget yes, and versus yes, but. Right? The but is what actually creates a negative environment. One more comment. This is from Harvard. The best design teams, psychologically, they are cognitively diverse, which means I need introverts and I need extroverts. If I have all extroverts, I'm going to get an entirely different solution and problem set. Cognitive diversity means I need to round out the team in terms of their seeking style, and I must provide psychological safety from the leadership, the team facilitator, etc. Number 5, prototype and test. What we're trying to do here is to build something fast and tangible quickly. This is the power of design thinking. We're not going to create a real prototype concept. That comes later. In the early stages, we really want to develop what's called a low-res prototype, something of your idea put into physical form in one form or the other. And what you have to do is realize you have to start thinking with your hands, okay? I'm going to show you a workshop. I think it is, yeah. So this is a workshop we did with a bank. They're highly concerned about the disruption and potential complete dissolution of the ATM machine. Now, I think if you go to New York now, it's literally, there are prototypes out that they're eyeballed. You put your eyeball in, you put your finger down, it knows who you are, and you simply speak into it, voice command, it actually does voice recognition, and you say, I want $100, and it gives you $100. There's no more card, okay? Do you realize that this is a problem? Like, I carry, like, at least 5 cards. You got to take it out. Have you ever lost your credit card? Yeah, and none of you, and some of you don't sleep, right? Because you went, whoa, did somebody get it? Are they buying, stuff on my credit card? This is actually what's called friction. This is actually my MRT card, but it's called friction. Banks are trying to figure out how to get rid of your wallet. Forget carrying money. So what they had to do, in one day, they could only use the material in the room. This is less than 1 day. In fact, this was half a day. They had to model the ATM machine for the next 5 years. Using all the data, they had research, they had IT, they had all the cross-functional team in there. But these were prototypes done in a half day with people who had never, ever built a prototype before they walked into the workshop in Thailand. You get this? Learning this is critical. But when they started, it was like, because they're used to doing this, Excel spreadsheets and phones. That's the world that they live in. And then you say, build it out of spaghetti and aluminum foil and Post-it notes, okay? An entirely different creative process. This itself brings up creative energy. Ooh, we forgot about this in the problem statement, and how does this satisfy the need and so forth? So what they say in prototyping is design for the extremes and test for the mean. And I'm going to show you this in a minute. Now I'm going to show you a high-res prototype. This is different. Now I'm iterating through the design thinking process. We're getting better and better. We think we have a new business model. We think the abstraction of a new business model, okay? Now what I'm going to show you is what's called a prototype, which is, this is high-res. This takes a little bit of time and a little bit of money, and what they're doing with this particular video is they're testing the market, okay? So let's see what they did, and this happens to be, by the way, in the insurance business, trying to figure out how to use technology more effectively.
No, it's just construction, that's all. No, I'm not driving.
Are you okay?
Yeah, you?
I'm good.
Oh, no, not you. Listen, I'm gonna have to call my agent. I'm gonna get right back to you.
Mr. Burton, this is Insure Corp. We've received sensor data that indicates you were in an accident. Are you injured in any way?
I'm not injured, no.
Is anyone else injured?
I don't believe so.
Okay, where's my agent's number?
We have pinpointed your location and we are showing your car is not drivable. So we are dispatching an Uber car to take you to your destination.
That would be great.
I'm pressing 1. English. E-N-G-L-I, English.
May we give your coordinates to our appraiser drone to perform the appraisal?
Absolutely.
We have received the photos, assessed the damage, authorized the repair, selected a qualified repair facility, and have dispatched a tow truck to take your vehicle to that facility.
Perfect.
Yes, hi, this is... Yes, I'll hold.
We have looked up the other vehicle's insurance, transmitted the appropriate data to create the claim, and filed the California SR1 accident report. Can you confirm the information is correct on your phone, then hit the accept button?
I'll check it right now. Okay, all done.
Thank you. Your Uber car is arriving now.
I see it coming.
Accident, not payment. Accident.
Your tow truck should be there now. Don't forget to leave your keys in the vehicle. Thank you for using Insure Corp, powered by Pivotal Labs.
Okay, so what do you think? Less than 5 minutes, that's a business model prototype. You see all the, and by the way, it's just using current technology. Maybe a little bit of data structure they have to do at the right time. This isn't about inventing anything other than recombining known technology to solve problems and empathize. But that's what they call a high res, because that takes a little bit of time and creative energy. You have to shoot a video, right? But that's huge, because they can go to a large market test on YouTube and find out, would people do this and start actually deeper ethnographic research with the concept, because they haven't built the system yet. They haven't got the money yet to go build the real system that they're looking at. I'm going to go through these next two because I really do want to get to the 7th really quickly. Step 5 is you got to learn. You got to iterate. You're going to have to understand that failure is a positive event. And this is one, culturally speaking, you can't punish people. You can't have a sense of losing face if people are making mistakes, because that's what you want. Iteration is a learning experience. Failing a test is a major opportunity. And there's research that's been done, even in the US, many companies punish failure far more than they do success, and so people avoid it. So you have to have good leadership around design thinking. The notion is of the risk mindset is of experimentation. Move fast, go ugly, as I say. Go fast, go ugly, make mistakes, but just move fast, right? Just do it. You go to Stanford, this is all over the D school. Just do it. Don't talk about it, do it. Because in doing it, you actually learn. Project-based learning happens faster. Needless to say that if I'm truly in innovation up front, there's a lot more uncertainty. We really don't know where is the problem, what technology might fix, et cetera. Certainty comes down here when we're going to go ask the VC for money. with a business case. The notion is, again, from a leadership, you have to be persistent. The question is, how many times will I allow the team to fail? Was that a good one? You bet. And your executives are going to want to know the answer to that question, right? The short answer is, it depends, right? It depends on how good the process is. But in design thinking, it's the notion of iteration and going back and refiguring things out. But if you look at some of the major successful inventions, inventions and innovations in the market, this is the light bulb. 10,000 times he had to go through the experiment to come up with a huge, revolutionary, disruptive technology in the marketplace, right? So the short answer is, it's not one, it's not two, and it could be a lot depending on what you're doing. Persistence is critical. Don't stop. You might be at the very moment you have the insight in the hot tub. It's coming because the persistence is going to drive you to success. The last case, which some of you may or may not have gotten involved with, if you're still in startup and doing prototyping, eventually you must go ask for money, and people, and support. And you usually either do this in a corporate world, you go to your corporate planning, your innovation lab, or if you're in a startup, you go ask either a friend for some dough, or you go ask a VC, hey, give me some money. I think I can get to the next phase. So at Stanford, we have a whole course and assessment on this of entrepreneurial financing and so forth. I'm not going to go through this, but you have it. There's an opportunity assessment framework that you would look at as though you need to be prepared to have a convincing argument with a venture capitalist, okay? Because here's what the venture capitalist will ask you in general most of the time when you come up. It is this. Will the team survive the valley of death? Right here. Because you're going to burn cash, and will you turn the corner, and will we get to the success point? Maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows, whatever the time frame is that's been modeled for you to get through this process, right? So people with money are trying to figure out, will the team stay together to get to the success? It could be 1, 2, 3 years. I heard last night, one company in startup, they're in their 5th year. And they're still in the valley of death. Not a single profit dollar has been made yet, but they're still going because they're on it. They can feel the turning point happening. Simple rules. At the end, what you must be prepared to do. If you don't trust the team, and this is from the venture capitalist perspective, don't do it. If you don't know the market, don't do it. And this is the questions of the actual design thinking team. If you don't understand the technology, don't do it. So those are kind of 3 basic rules to assess. My basic perspective is it starts from the beginning, and you have to have a whole process, a holistic thinking, in order to manage the success of a design thinking project. There's a beginning and an end. The hard part is in the execution. And that's why I wrote the book. The hard part is here. That's where the value comes. This is the creative space. That's the creative space. This is much cheaper, but this is where you spend all the money. This is where you spend huge amount of resource and time in order to drive your innovations. At SEAC, we have a 4-day boot camp. We actually use the 2 instructors here in our course. This is Jeremy and Perry. They're co-adjunct professors at Stanford. We use that process in terms of actually talking about design thinking. And here's the deal, and I think I'm right on time. Your business requires a strategy. Your strategy requires innovation because of the things we've talked about with change. The innovation requires design thinking. And by the way, you can call it something else. The 27 different models, there's at least 7 of those that have nothing, they don't even say design thinking. They call it inverse lean innovation. Agile lean something, right? You can call it whatever, but have a framework to do your innovation. Your design thinking requires a new mindset, especially in Thailand, as we talked about with the cultural thing. Your mindset determines your future, and your future is what you learn and relearn now. We all have to learn new skills to keep up with the things that are coming in our world. Never stop learning, because life is never stop teaching. It's the power of understanding impermanence and so forth. So with that, I leave you with this notion. Innovation is love. If you love what you do and you love your customers' problems, you will innovate effectively. So I appreciate the time that we've had together. Please now take a photo. This is when you should take the photo. If you want the slides, get the QR code. Do they still do this in the U.S. now? But this is in Thailand. This is the way you do it. You get online and and if you want, come join me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly posting stuff, sharing stuff with my network that's been with me now for about 20 years. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great honor. Good luck in all that you do. Swati kap, kapun kap.
Thank you very much, Mr. William Malek.